The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Well, good morning, CHD. It is Wednesday, May 7th. I'm Miriam Eckenfels and I run the EMR Wireless program over here at CHD. Today on the show, I will be talking to Scott McCollough about a brand new initiative called 704 No More. Then we'll go to Dawn Richardson with Advocacy Lifeline, and then stay tuned at the end of the show for another People's Study also. But first, let's look at a few headlines. A lot of news coming out of Florida. As Florida becomes the second state to ban fluoride in public drinking water, which is very exciting. And then they also passed a bill to ban and criminalize geoengineering. If you would like to read up on these articles, they are posted in the show notes. It's definitely interesting stuff. But now I want to have a conversation about a brand new initiative we are working on in the EMR and Wireless program called 704 No More. And for that, I would like to bring in our lead litigator for EMR and Wireless cases, Scott McCollough, a regular on CHD TV, and he's obviously the legal mastermind behind everything we do in the wireless space. So welcome, Scott.
Well, good morning, CHD.
Good to have you. So 704 No More. Before we get into discussion, let me set the stage. We in the EMR and Wireless program, we've been litigating on behalf of people who got injured by cell towers near their homes for the past couple of years. And we basically learned one thing. Once a cell tower is up, there's virtually nothing you can do about it. And if you happen to get sick, as many of our clients have, or if your property value goes down, your neighborhood deteriorates, or if the birds, bees, and trees around you suffer, you're pretty much out of luck. You can't sue telecom. You can't get help from the FCC. You can't use state tort law. You can't use state environmental law. And you can't even use federal disability laws because we tried all of it, right? So you're just on your own. And most importantly, you can't stop a tower from transmitting. So you simply can't get relief. Scott, tell us why that is and what we are trying to do about it through 704 No More.
Traditionally, the states and state law has been how things like local zoning and land use were resolved. Local communities got to decide what infrastructure was placed and where and under what conditions. State law also determined remedies for things like personal injury and property invasions, things like trespass or private nuisance. Congress and the courts have, however, basically eliminated all that in favor of rule by a single federal agency, here the FCC. And it is effectively itself killed off bodily integrity, informed consent, people's property rights. So what we intend to do is just challenge the underlying premise behind all of this. The court decisions, the federal statute, you quoted some of it just a minute ago. The top line of the argument is that involuntary toxic exposure by radio frequency radiation violates the 5th and 7th Amendments and is inconsistent with the 9th and 10th Amendments. We contend Congress and the FCC don't have the authority, even under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, to authorize non-consensual exposure and cannot preempt state or other federal or even other federal laws that offer a judicial remedy for the harms people suffer. We're going to bring several distinct but subsidiary legal claims and requests for relief, and I can get into those a little bit more later.
Right. So we're essentially trying to put the power back into people's hands, into local authorities' hands, and to give people a way to defend themselves if they're injured. Now, I just want to put a plug for the 704 No More website at this point that we put up, where people can read through everything we'll be discussing today. And at the bottom of the page, there's also a sign up button, how you can sign up for the email listserv that we're going to be having, keeping people up to date. And we can also put those links in the show notes. But Scott, you've been fighting against telecom overreach for years, decades, right? What made you decide that now is the time to go over this entire federal preemption scheme?
Well, basically, it's because whenever these things come up, everybody just assumes that what we have now is okay. And nobody's really forced a court to analyze whether the Constitution permits any of this. People have individual rights. That's what the Bill of Rights is all about. And yet, the way things work now, people just have no rights. Everybody has to accept exposure from these wireless systems. And I'm talking about towers and, devices like Wi-Fi routers, all of this wireless stuff that's out there. They just have to accept it. And, even those who don't want wireless service and don't use it have to accept this. And what we think is that, the Commerce Clause doesn't allow Congress to just take away all of these individual rights. And it certainly doesn't allow a federal agency in Washington, D.C. to determine people's individual private rights. We have a right to a jury trial here under the 7th Amendment. And yet all of that's just gone. And we're going to force the court to just tell us whether this is lawful, whether it can actually be, given what our Constitution says.
Right. And I think it's important to also understand that we're not talking about hypotheticals, right? Like in the current rollout, particularly of the 5G, the fifth technology, but fifth generation of wireless technology, but just in general, when cell towers are moving close to homes, close to schools, on playgrounds, on football fields, we see time and time again that people are getting sick. The environment suffers. The neighborhood, the look and feel of the neighborhood changes. And it is, in our opinion, an untenable situation that there is simply nothing that people can do about it. You mentioned that we are going to argue that a lot of the ways that the current laws are set up are unconstitutional, or how they have been interpreted by the court are unconstitutional. Do you want to go into a little bit more detail about the legal arguments that you are planning on raising and why you believe that this violates the Constitution and people's individual rights?
Yes, but let me get back to something you just said, because it's really the underlying reason for why we need to do this. One of these towers goes up, people start getting sick. We've got some folks in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. A tower went up. Within days, a cluster of 19 people started getting deathly ill, including many children. We've got clients who a cell tower goes on and they start having strokes. One of our clients, 51 strokes within days. Another client, huge heart issues. And these are affecting individual people. Now, Congress seems to think that, these folks just must be sacrificed, apparently, in the name of modern age and people be able to watch cat videos on the beach in New Jersey. But we think that, actually, that's not the way it's supposed to be. People have individual rights. And so what we're going to ask is for a court to declare that the Communications Act, which is the statute that governs the FCC, and in particular one provision that says local jurisdictions can't regulate infrastructure placement on the basis of environmental effects, which has in turn been interpreted to mean also health effects, that this cannot operate to deprive people of life, liberty, or property without due process or compensation by allowing non-consensual exposure released by third parties pursuant to federal authorizations, here the FCC, without any remedy before an actual court and a jury. We think that this provision of the Communications Act, what we call Section 704, hence the name, and even the conflict preemption cases coming out of the courts saying somebody who gets brain cancer from a cell phone can't sue the cell phone manufacturer or the wireless provider for personal injuries. We think that that violates the Fifth Amendment because it deprives people of life, liberty, and property without due process. So it violates what we call both substantive and procedural due process. We think that, right now, if you've got a problem with the tower or some other wireless device, you have to actually go to the FCC and ask those guys for help. And of course, they're not going to give it to you. They're going to turn you away. But we say that people can't be forced to turn to the FCC as the sole venue for relief here. It's what we call an Article I executive agency, not an Article III court. And under the case law, these agencies cannot adjudicate what we call private rights. My right to bodily autonomy, my right to informed consent. The FCC does not have the constitutional power to adjudicate these issues, and we're going to ask a court to rule that way.
Right. And I think what you just mentioned is really at the core, right? We are being told by Section 704 by Congress that as long as a tower operates under the FCC limits, local authorities can determine where that tower goes. So if it's outside of your house, if it's on your school, if it's on a playground, they can take health and environmental effects into consideration. And we already know that the standards that the FCC sets are arbitrary and capricious and entirely inaccurate, not taking into consideration non-thermal effects, not taking into consideration the tens of thousands of pages of science that have been submitted to the DC Circuit, them not complying with the court order to review their standards. And then the courts say, well, if you have an issue, go to the FCC, which is like just a circular argument that really leaves people without protection. And I think it's really important that people understand that we need to tackle this entire system if we want to do anything about the insane amount of cell towers that are popping up throughout neighborhoods. And so what happens if we win, if we get the ruling that you mentioned?
Well, if we win, then local jurisdictions will again be able to decide whether a tower by a cell company can go in a particular location. They can say no. If, for example, someone right next to where that tower is proposed runs livestock or bees, and there's a credible threat that turning that tower on would harm the livestock. Or somebody saying, wait, my child has already been diagnosed as being sensitive to RFR. If you put this right next to my child's bedroom window, you're going to make my child sick. You're going to make worse some of their other existing conditions. Many children that are on, say, for example, the autism spectrum, we know from the science that radio frequency exposure, even if it doesn't cause the underlying autistic syndrome, it exacerbates the behavioral problems. We know from test studies that removing radio frequency radiation from the environment for children like this improves their condition. And so a local jurisdiction will be able to say, no, this tower shouldn't go right next to a school. It shouldn't go right next to a home. It could be down the street in a commercial district. Now, let me emphasize, we're not saying ban this stuff. Right. Everybody, has cell phones. I have one. I use it all the time. But I can exercise control over when I choose to expose myself or my family. I can turn it off at night. I can put it somewhere else. I can make sure my children don't sleep right next to it. I don't have a baby monitor or any of this other stuff that just contaminates the environment. I exercise my rights to determine how this goes. What we're going after is the involuntary exposure, the stuff that nobody can individually do anything about or control. We're giving local control, and we're returning individual rights so that people can exercise self-determination, so that they can exercise control over whether and when they are exposed.
Right. And local control is so important because that's where democracy happens, right? And so communities can actually decide how much or ideally how little connectivity they want or what is just enough. So some communities that we're working with in New Jersey, they say we don't want 5G on the beach, right? Or we don't want the 5G towers in this area. And that has to be an option that communities can come together and decide. And we are also, I want to put a plug in for the stop5g.org website and initiative that if people want to, if people know, oh, there's a cell tower project proposed in my neighborhood, or oh, there is a cell tower proposed on my children's schools. There are things that you can do before a cell tower goes up. And unless and until we topple the regime, the 704 regime that we are now talking about, people need to start fighting back on the local level in the permitting process when there is still political power and political influence that communities have on whether a cell tower is permitted or not. So definitely check out the Stop 5G initiative at stop5g.org, and also follow us on social media at Stop5G near me. And I want to use a couple of minutes to talk about how people can get involved in the 704 No More initiative and how they can help to move the initiative forward in their own communities. And so again, 704nomore.org contains all the information that you need to know. You can donate to support the litigation efforts. You can join the organizational structure of the initiative. You can contribute to the educational and advocacy efforts if that is something that interests you, and you can, and I encourage the viewers to subscribe to the email list so that they can stay up to date. We have shareable assets and flyers on the website that people can share within their communities. We will also put the one-page flyer in the show notes, and we're encouraging people to share it and to start talking about it. We'll be also soon launching sort of like a search for ideal plaintiffs on whose behalf we are going to bring the litigation. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to be talking about it. If you have an interest in supporting the initiative by being a walking, talking billboard, we have 704 No More merchandise in our store that you can look at and order if you choose to do that, and you can get engaged in conversations around Section 704 by attending your city council meetings, your zoning board meetings, your to talk to your county commissioners, and to really start having these conversations about, hey, did you know that you cannot determine the location of a cell tower based on health and environmental concerns, and there is something we need to do about that. So I encourage everyone to follow the initiative and to get involved. We'll be talking more about it in the coming months, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to keep the CHDTV viewers posted. So Scott, thank you very much for coming on, as always, for taking the time and for spearheading this amazing project on the legal side. I'm very grateful for all you do.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, and I hope everybody can keep track of this and join in the effort. Looking for folks to join in and help out in all the ways Miriam just listed. This is going to be a group effort. It's going to take a lot of villages to raise this child.
Absolutely. And I think we're also, if you go to 704nomore.org, you'll see at the bottom of the page all of the, I think we're close to 80 safe tech organizations across the nation who have joined the 704 No More coalition and who are part of this effort. And CHD is very, very proud to be able to be a part of such an amazing group of organizations fighting for such an important cause. So That being said, I'm now handing over to Dawn Richardson for the Advocacy Lifeline.
Is Dawn Richardson, and welcome to Advocacy Lifeline on CHD TV. Thank you so much for joining us today. The purpose of this show is to empower you, our viewers, to be able to use your voice to affect change for law, policy, and public opinion through education and action for issues that affect your family and things that are important to you. So this is a really exciting show today. It's important. And I just need to go through a few disclaimers first. The opinions expressed today are my own and not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense Television or the National Vaccine Information Center, where I work full-time as a director of advocacy. This is not medical advice. It's not legal advice. It's just common sense information about a good bill that we're trying to get passed. So we'll go on with it today. And I am dedicating this episode to help build nationwide support and Ohio support to pass a great bill, House Bill 12 in Ohio. It's called the Jeff, Dave, and Angie Patient Right to Try Act. And there are multiple important parts of this bill that can help protect access to medical care, including also protecting a healthcare provider's medical free speech related to off-label drugs and to medical interventions, which includes vaccination. And you all know that that is my specialty area, vaccine policy and law and medical freedom. So anyway, we're going to get right into this today. And to help explain this bill and what you can do to help, I have two great guests that I'd like to introduce. We've got Ohio State Representative DJ Swearington. He is the House sponsor of House Bill 12, and Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom President Stephanie Stock. Thank you both. Yeah, thank you guys for coming on and being with us today. We really appreciate your time. I know that this is your busiest season. We're getting into that part of session where everybody's running crazy. So we appreciate you taking the time to get the word out there today. So before we get into specifics, Representative Swearington, for our viewers in other parts of the country who don't know you, that they're not in Ohio, can you please share your background and how you became interested in health freedom issues?
Sure. Thanks, Dawn, for the invitation to be on the show today. Really appreciate it. My background, I'm a business attorney by trade. I have a small real estate investment company with some of my friends that we do. And then I'm a legislator. It's part-time, supposed to be a part-time legislature in Ohio. So, after we're done legislating, the goal is to go back to your job, your family, and get yourself in the real world, which I think is incredibly important. So I always advocate to my colleagues to have a life outside of the legislature so you can be in touch with the people in your district. So I do that, married 3 girls as daughters, and, went to the State House in 2019 and didn't really have medical freedom advocacy in my sights. Not that I'm opposed to it by any means. It just wasn't top of mind for me personally. Some of the issues that I wanted to work on in my district specifically were workforce related, training kids for jobs, getting them skills they need to have careers, transportation issues, and hopefully reshoring jobs back to the states. That was President Trump's one of his big initiatives that I really liked. Wanted to be a part of that. And then COVID hit, and during COVID, we all realized what was going on in short order and some of the overreach by different executive offices and the government as a whole. And I think that really turned a lot of people's attention, including my own, to medical freedom issues. So, that's where I first got interested in paying attention to some of these very important, critical issues. I don't think any of us really foresaw the government responding to that crisis and the way that it did with such a heavy hand. And because of that, here I sit.
And just to go back a little bit, because I always get interested in people's inspiration to actually run for state office. And what my ulterior motive for talking about this on the show is that we need more people like you in state offices around the country. And I want people to think about, well, if it's going to be, it's up to me. You can't keep complaining. What was it about running what was it that inspired you to run for state office?
Great question. It's really, truly an opportunity to make a positive difference in your community. So for my area, we are on the Lake Shore, Lake Erie in Ohio, Northern Ohio, and there's a lot of positive momentum in our community. Different, things like the downtown area and kind of, mom and pop shops moving back onto Main Street and, rejuvenating kind of the Rust Belt, if you will, that we get labeled with in Ohio. And I wanted to be a part of that at the state level. So that's why I wound up running for office. I won. I've actually had 4 opponents at this point, 3 Democrats, 1 Republican, and I've had 4 races in 6 years. So it's kind of been a lot, but it's worth it for the privilege of representing the people of this district at the State House. And if there's anyone, thinking about running, you should do it. And Dawn, I think you hit the nail on the head because, you hear a lot of complaints from various individuals. Oh, I wish the government would do this. I wish they do that. Well, get involved. That's such a critical message for people to hear. You can get off the couch, go make a difference, even just in small little ways, like attending local events, helping a local candidate that you support, knocking on some doors for individuals that you support their mission and their vision for elected office. Even if it's just telling your friends, hey, this is a quality individual, and shooting out 20 text messages on a weekend that this person's on the ballot and they do a really good job. The cumulative effect of that effort does turn the tide. And it's easy to feel hopeless sometimes. Mm-hmm. I've been there myself, but it's absolutely worth doing. And I'd encourage anyone to get involved or run themselves.
I love that. Thank you so much for backing that up. So Stephanie, can you share with us a little bit about your background? How did you get into being an advocate for medical freedom, for health freedom? And explain your role at Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom.
Sure. So what kind of got me involved in the medical freedom issue in the first place, unfortunately, like many of us, was a child that was injured. Now, thank God I didn't have a severe injury for my oldest, but it was enough that it definitely has caused us problems over the years. So that was kind of the driving force. Once I realized, oh my gosh, this happened to my child, started to research, there's no placebos, this is crazy, what's going on? At that point, I started getting active with other holistic moms. We were trying to do educative initiatives, parades, vaccine risk awareness, that type of thing. And then eventually we said, hey, we need to do more than just educate and parades. We need to be active in Columbus. We need to be protecting our rights that we do have for exemptions and making sure that we can make progress in other areas, So we started in 2015. I started out as the head of PR and very quickly became the president. I always joke because nobody else wanted to do it or is crazy enough to do it for free. But here I am. And my role is whatever is necessary, whether that be helping write bills or assisting the legislators for anything related to our bills that they need, PR, interviews, just the works, whatever needs done, testimony. So, that's where I am with OAMF, and we keep our website up to date with our calls to action on all of the bills that they're either our bills or bills that we support, and there are others. There are other good bills right now that people would like. We have those listed on our website as well that are MAHA related bills. So just staying busy, as you know, and helping out NVICA too. I work part-time for you guys, and so I'm everything medical freedom. Just
You absolutely are. And, everything that Stephanie does through OAMF is volunteer. So for those of you who are in Ohio who care about these issues, don't be afraid to go to her website and drop a donation in there as well. Well, let's get into the meat of why we're here today. Representative Swearington, can you please explain what your House Bill 12 does and explain why did you sponsor this?
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. And House Bill 12 is a bill that I've introduced along with Representative Jennifer Gross. And Representative Gross and Representative Wojcik actually introduced and carried this bill last General Assembly. It was House Bill 73 2 years ago. And we got it through the House. I was a big supporter of that bill. And parts of it made it to the finish line, parts of it didn't. And then ultimately it wound up largely getting vetoed, except for a very small portion of that bill. So we're bringing it back General Assembly, and I've teamed up with Representative Gross. Representative Wojcik no longer serves in the legislature, and we've relabeled it to House Bill 12. It's no longer House Bill 73. And essentially what the bill does is it allows doctors to prescribe off-label prescriptions for any type of treatment that they deem to be in the best interest of their patient, that the patient has consented to. And also it clarifies the free speech aspect that doctors have in the state of Ohio. So if they're talking about anything medically related, they can do that. And that's a healthy thing that's good for the dialogue around the medical community. Without retribution from regulatory boards. So, one of the most alarming things, among others, that I saw during COVID was just how certain doctors spoke up and said, hey, I don't necessarily agree with this. I think we could do it this way and it would be effective, and how they were immediately silenced. They faced disciplinary action for their comments. And, at one point, we used to do really silly things in the medical community way back when, until someone raised their hand and said, you know what, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think we should do things like bloodlet patients and let them bleed out and try to cure a disease that way. We can actually do it this way. One time we thought the earth was flat, and now we know it's not. So things that get challenged in a healthy way, that's good for the scientific community as a whole. And I think watching those voices get silenced was extremely alarming, just because that's not how we operate in the United States. We believe in free speech, we believe in dialogue. And if their ideas aren't good ideas, then that's going to come out organically. It's going to be shown that that's a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. Actually, it works this way. So, the free speech aspect of this bill especially was really important to me, just because of what we saw during COVID. Obviously, I'm sorry, my dog's coming in the house.
We can't even hear him. You're fine.
Okay. Obviously, the off-label prescription is critically important as well. So there's a number of different aspects of this bill that I really like. And I hope this General Assembly, we can get this thing across the finish line and signed into law in Ohio.
That's great. Well, Stephanie, there's a name, the name to this bill. It provokes you to wonder, who are Dave, Jeff, and Angie, and how did their name get in the bill? And how did the bill actually get its name? And why is this bill so important to you?
So actually in late 2021, a couple reached out to me. They had lost Crystal Boyles had reached out to me, and she had lost her sister Angie and her brother-in-law Dave to hospital protocol. And she told me the story, and it was so absolutely heart-wrenching. And we had heard so many stories like that across the board. They were forced on remdesivir. They were forced onto a ventilator. They were denied nutrition and food if they didn't accept the intervention. It was just horrific, the things that we saw. And there was a constituent of Representative Gross, actually a friend of hers, whose husband was in the hospital. He was being denied care. And she is actually the woman, if you followed that back in 2021, she actually sued the hospital to get ivermectin. They gave it to him for about a week. He was getting better. Then the hospital countersued to take the ivermectin away. I mean, can you imagine? such a safe drug. Worst case scenario, it doesn't do anything for him. Imagine suing. She had to come up with another $7,000, and she lost. They voted, and he gave in favor of the hospital, and they took away the medicine, and he ended up dying actually of a UTI that was untreated, not even COVID. It was just catastrophic, the things that we saw. So we wanted to honor them by including their names. There were many, many more names than that, and those people have come forward, many of them testifying for the bill. But we wanted to at least represent a small fraction of the people, because it's such a personal issue. I mean, people died because they couldn't get basic, safe medications because of political reasons and because of financial reasons. And it was we can't allow that to happen again. So that's where the name of the bill came from. I think Representative Swearington covered the content of the bill pretty well. I did want to let people know it doesn't just apply to hospitals. It also applies to outpatient pharmacies, because the goal is really get treatment when you first get sick. Why are all these right to try bills like you're already on death's door, there's no hope, now we'll give you treatment? How about we give you some treatment when you first get sick, you get better, and you never go to the hospital in the first place? So that really is what this bill is about, is saving patients, preventing them from going into the hospital, and making sure that nothing that we saw during COVID ever happens again, because we're going to restore the doctor-patient relationship. We're going to restore the medical free speech and make sure those patients are getting informed consent.
That's fantastic. Well, Representative Swearington, I know you had a physician that you knew who was disciplined or threatened by the board, and you also had people contact you throughout this time about how, if this bill had been enacted during the COVID time, how it would have helped them. Can you just share a couple instances of personal stories of real people in Ohio that this could have helped?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, I'll just start with, Angie's family members. The day we passed the bill in the Ohio House, it was in 2023, and they were up in the gallery, and we passed this bill, and immediately they started crying, and it just kind of, I was sitting on the floor and I could see them up there, and it just dawned on me, these are real people with real problems that they want solved and they want fixed. And these types of bills impact people in a very real way. So to see them, show that emotion in the gallery, in the Ohio State House on the day we passed the bill, really hit home for me. Like, this is worth doing. This means a lot to the people of Ohio. For me personally, I did have a doctor in my district that was really harassed by our local paper for her perspective, and that was unfortunate. She did speak out during COVID and say, actually, I think X, Y, and Z is a better way of doing things. And like I said earlier, I probably sound like a broken record, but that's what we want our doctors doing. If something's wrong, we want them to say that. We want our doctors to be able to have an environment where they tell the truth. That's the most important thing. We always heard growing up, the truth will set you free. And, if they're being truthful, that's the best situation we can put our medical community in, because like I said, then they have the opportunity to speak freely, to challenge opinions and viewpoints, and hopefully arrive at the best outcome that they possibly can get to. And by the best outcome, we're going to help individuals in Ohio also achieve, a healthy lifestyle. So, it was really sad for me to watch this individual go through that with the local paper and be made out to be some sort of villain when they were just trying to help people in the best way that they knew how. So, that was very, very alarming and upsetting to me personally. And to see that, and then the reactions of the family members for Dave and Angie on this bill, it really hit home. And since then, we've heard a lot of anecdotal stories of people who, were denied access or denied care, or doctors who were threatened with their license for speaking up. And hopefully, like I said, we can put all of that to an end here in Ohio very soon.
I think that, and thank you for sharing that. We get involved with all these bills, but they affect real people's lives. And for a lot of people, they did not get the warning early enough that the COVID vaccine could cause myocarditis, pericarditis, strokes, and turbo cancers, and God knows what else that'll all keep coming out. And if doctors weren't censored, if their information wasn't shut down, or if they weren't threatened with their license to be taken away, a lot of lives could have been saved. And so that's why this part is, for me, is very important also. And what the bill basically in a nutshell does is it prohibits a health regulated or a health relegated licensing board, the Department of Health, or other state agencies responsible for the licensure or regulation of healthcare professionals from infringing on free speech through licensure or regulatory discipline or fines against a prescriber, a pharmacist, or other licensed healthcare professionals for publicly or even privately expressing an opinion regarding the safety, risks, benefits, or efficacy of a drug or other medical interventions, including vaccination, that does not align with the opinions of the board, department, other state agency, or board of health, or city, or general health district, or other health authority. Basically, this will protect people that aren't part of the party line or on the payroll from the pharmaceutical companies. They can challenge the safety, the efficacy, and even the necessity of a treatment or a vaccination. And that is so important. And it really hurts inside thinking about all the people that could have made different and better decisions if this information wasn't censored. So I am not aware of this type of language anywhere in the country right now. And I'm really glad that you both are champions for it. I think it's really important. Stephanie, I wanted to ask you, and because Representative Swearington said y'all tried to pass House Bill 73 last session, it did not ultimately pass both chambers, but some provisions from that bill have already been enacted in state law. Can you explain what those were?
Sure. So we had a rewrite in the Senate, unfortunately, and so when it came back, it was so badly demolished, we had to not concur. They really jacked the bill up in the Senate. So what happened then was they had to go to a conference committee. We were trying to slip whatever little bits we could possibly get through, and God love, DJ was on the conference committee fighting for us for the few provisions that we did get through. We did get through the provision of the bill that said you couldn't starve or deny nutrition to a patient in the hospital except for, a test or something basic like that. It's amazing that we would have to have that language, but with as many people as told us that happened, we felt that was important. That got through. We actually got the free speech provision through. It got vetoed by our Republican governor because he said that it could somehow lead to a doctor not being liable for something, which was nuts. So now in the rewrite of the bill, we have noted at the bottom of the free speech section, nothing in this section prevents liability for a doctor that actually causes physical patient harm. He's not causing harm by speaking freely. That's just a ridiculous thing that fake Republicans do to veto bills. So that was struck down. And then we did get a great provision through. The World Health Organization shall have no jurisdiction in the state of Ohio. They can't incentivize any of their mandates, edicts, rules, any of that stuff. They can't use state funding to implement anything like that. So we were able to get that over the line. That wasn't vetoed, thankfully, and neither was the nutrition portion. And I really hope free speech doesn't get vetoed this time. I hope it won't. I think with that additional bit in there, I think it's going to be pretty hard to deny free speech, especially since not informing patients of risks, actually, not only does it violate our constitutional right, it actually violates the AMA's medical code of ethics. They clearly state that doctors are supposed to do that. So when the I think it's the American Federation of State Boards came out with their letter in 2021 saying, hey, doctors, basically have a lot of clout and they can influence people. So, hey, if you guys say anything negative about the COVID-19 vaccine, by the way, we're coming for your license. It was a direct, clear threat to their licenses if they were to inform patients of risks of the COVID-19 vaccine or any misinformation regarding COVID-19. I mean, that's 100. I mean, that's the most unethical thing I've ever heard. And yet they did it. So this writes a very, very egregious wrong. And I hope that every state, if we can get this done, I really hope other states will mimic the language and get this passed everywhere, because I mean, this is a huge issue for informed consent.
It absolutely is. You're 100% correct there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the obstacles that y'all face in getting this passed, and specifically some of the objections that that medical profession, others have expressed. For example, people will say that there's off-label use. Those labels are there for a reason. If a drug or a vaccine or if some medical intervention has not been tested and approved for a specific use, then it shouldn't be allowed. How would you respond to that? Either one of you can jump in.
Rep. Swearington, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
That's a really good question, Dawn. It's something that I actually asked before, starting my advocacy for this bill. And you come to find out that actually the medical community prescribes off-label all the time. Like, it's actually a pretty common occurrence. And they do so, they inform the patients, the patients know what's going on. It happens pretty frequently, actually. Really at the heart of that is liability. And that's what some of the opponents of the bill have pushed back on. So, if a pharmacist doesn't want to prescribe this medication because they have, some objection to it, or, some sort of outpatient or inpatient facility has similar objection, they don't want to be a part of it. We provided in the bill that the prescribing doctor is willing to bear all the liability at this point. The facilities will be held harmless. The pharmacy and the pharmacist will be held harmless. Just prescribe the drug. So if a patient and a doctor have gone over the drug, the risks, the cause and effect of everything, the illness, we see that as a doctor-patient relationship that is really important and critical, and should be protected. So we've tried to take care of some of the liability provisions. We're already respecting the fact that this is kind of a common practice in the medical community already. Also, as long as the doctor and the patient are informed, they know the risk, this is a right to try bill, we're recognizing that freedom and truth and transparency should at the end of the day govern, and that's what we believe this bill does.
And Stephanie, yes, I agree 100%. And I just wanted to get that out there because, this is the first thing that people will ask. And you're absolutely right. My dad was just in the hospital and they were trialing a new product that it wasn't a new product. It was used for an entirely different purpose, and it had fantastic results. And I was so grateful that they were able to use it because it drastically improved his outcome. And does that always happen? No. Maybe sometimes it doesn't help. Maybe sometimes it harms. But like you said, the importance is the informed consent. You can have the conversations with the doctor, and they're free to tell you how often they've been doing this and what the general outcomes are. And so you can make an informed decision. To have some bureaucrat out there telling you can't have those conversations with your doctor to get you the best care possible is just like, that should be criminal. That's withholding life-saving information in many cases. Stephanie, did you want to add to that with any of the other obstacles that are objections that people are bringing up, and have a chance to clear the air on them and explain why they're not an issue?
Sure. So from the opposition side, the Ohio Pharmacists Association, Dave Burke, which is an ex-senator and friends with leadership, that's a problem. The hospital associations, they are the ones that are against it. I think we've handled a lot of any pushback the hospital associations can really say because of the liability provision. But with the pharmacist associations, there's more than one. What it is, Dawn, is a power struggle. The pharmacists want to play doctor. They are not doctors. A pharmacist's job is to fill. That part went really missing during all of COVID. And now they have this idea in their heads that they should be able to have this scientific objection. The doctor and the patient are making the scientific decision together. The doctor informs the pharmacist, hey, this is what I'm going to try. You don't have to like it. And if you don't like it, you can write down, I don't like this, but I'm filling it anyway, and you get total liability protection. But the patient and I want to try this. And so that's what we're going to do. Now, the bill does clearly state they can object for moral reasons. So if there's a moral objection, they can refuse to fill for that. That's already state law. They can also refuse to fill if there's anything life-threatening, because you can't put a patient's life at risk. If it's truly life-threatening, absolutely, you're going to deny it. That's current state law. So that's already covered. It's just if they have this other quote-unquote scientific objection, which could be their opinion based on what CNN told them the night before, right? And then they just say, well, we don't think that'll work. Well, that's not the pharmacist's job to say it won't work. So that, really it's just going to be a matter of whether the House and the Senate say, look, we're not going to keep favoring the fourth arm of the legislature. That's what I call the OPA and the OHA, because they have so much control. They've become part of the legislature. And it's really going to be up to, in this case, mostly the Republicans, to get this done and say, look, guys, we got to do a power check here. We need to restore the doctor-patient relationship. So we're going to get this bill done, whether you like it or not. And then the next obstacle will be the governor, because he'll veto it, and they'll have to come back for a veto override, because unfortunately our governor vetoes everything that's super good. So we anticipate that, but
story for another day.
Do their job. And then leadership, Matt and Steve Huffman and the Senate President, Rob McCollough, those are your people that you got to reach out to, because we have support. I mean, there's not really any Republican that I know of that has said, oh, it sounds like a terrible idea to restore the doctor-patient relationship. Free speech is a terrible idea. Nobody says that. They all support this bill. And if the leadership allows it to be called to a vote, this bill will pass.
You bring up a good observation about, where things kind of fall, where the chips fall that are along party lines. But, I think it's really important for people to not contact their legislators if they're a Democrat, because they're people. At the end of the day, health problems, vaccine reactions, none of these things discriminate based on your party. There are things that affect each and every one of us, and having sincere, polite conversations with everyone, no matter what party they are in, it can benefit. You don't know, you might touch a nerve, you might, get them to open their eyes. Still have those conversations, and don't discount them just because there's a D. Don't discount for Ds. Still talk to them, because at the end of the day, they're people too. They care about their family and their friends, and they want access to good health care, and they want to be able to get good information, even if some of the crazy people that are saying medical freedom is bad, information is bad, all of this, they don't have to listen. There are oftentimes that Democrats break, and then they do the right thing for a particular bill. And I think this is one of those bills that can reach across party lines if somebody can just break through that shell of that partisan politics. So just real quick, because we're running out of time here, Representative Swearington, where is the bill right now, and what is it that the bill needs to help it move forward? What should people do to help move the bill forward at this point, and where is it in the legislative process?
So thanks, Dawn. We had to start over again. So we're back in the House, and we are in the Health Committee. We are going into opponent testimony this week on the bill. It's the third hearing. I imagine we'll have a couple more hearings, would be my guess, and then hopefully a floor vote in the House. We do actually have some Democrat support in the House. Last general, there's a former representative, now state senator. She's an emergency room doctor, and she's spoke in favor of the bill on the floor for all the reasons that we've mentioned in this interview. So, we had some very positive developments in the House where it became a bipartisan bill with, I believe, 79 votes out of 99, so only 20 no votes, which is pretty good. So I'm hopeful that the bill will move fairly quickly through the House, given its history and its success in the previous General Assembly in the House. And we may make a few tweaks and fine tune the bill as we go along. And then it goes to the Senate. And I'd encourage folks in Ohio to reach their state senator. I know I read the emails that come into my office from my district. Those are very important to me, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. I like to see the viewpoint and perspective of people in my district. Same thing for people calling in and voicemails. My staff takes very careful note of that, especially if that person is from the district. That's critically important. So the good legislators will pay attention to people writing in and calling. And, again, it's one of those little things that may not feel like it makes a big difference, but when legislators are in the room discussing if this bill should get a vote or not, or how they're going to vote, I can tell you those voices will be in the back of their heads. And if they plan to vote a bill like this down, they're going to know, I had people email my office and call my office and say that this was important. They're literally going to have to take the step forward to turn that part of their brain off, which they shouldn't do, to roll a no vote out there on this bill. So, we need people writing and calling their legislators. I would encourage them to be polite, yet also very clear on where they stand on the issue. Don't be bashful. We want a yes vote, Representative so-and-so, thank you for your time. And this bill is important to me and my family. It means a lot. And it should mean a lot, because when you hear from people that voted you into office, that's important. And it's more important than, the outside influences that play politics with bills like this. So.
That's great advice. And, just to recap, make sure if you're in Ohio, you contact your representative, your state representative, and your state senator. Ask them to support Ohio House Bill 12. Give them just a line or two of why it's important to your family. Those personal stories make a difference. In addition, if you really want to help, you'll also contact the members of the House Health Committee, because they're in the middle of the hearings there right now. On the OAMF website, OhioOAMF.org. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's the website. And you can get calls to action there. Also on the NVIC advocacy portal, nvicadvocacy.org. On the Ohio State page, look for the post on House Bill 12. It has who to contact, what to say, follows every step of the way. So there's plenty of resources for you to get information. Any last tips that either one of you, because this is an advocacy show and we have a lot of new people that want to make a difference, and they sometimes aren't confident about what to say, how to say it. Any tips on how to talk to legislators that you didn't already cover with all the really basic important things like being polite, being sincere, and all that? Anything else for either one of you?
Yeah, I would say don't get discouraged and have hope, because this is something that will always be ongoing, right? Like the battle for truth and for freedom, that we have to be ever vigilant in that. And, even if something doesn't go your way or you don't feel like you're being heard, it gets extremely frustrating, I'm sure. But to stick with it and be consistent, and to just commit to the fact that this is a long-term thing. This is a long-term issue that you have to be committed to for, unfortunately, a long time, because if you don't, then who else is going to pick up that torch and do it? So commit to the long term, have hope. There's absolutely going to be letdowns and failures and bumps in the road, but stick with it and be consistent. And, in the long term, that's how we have to stay focused. So.
That's great. Those are great parting words there. And Stephanie, are there any tips on talking to legislators that you want to share? And is there anything left that you want to say that you didn't have a chance to say yet?
Yeah, so you've covered, obviously, ask them respectfully. I get a lot of criticism because I'm a little tougher as the organization, but and I say, hey, if your representative isn't voting how they should be on your bills, then I tell them, find somebody to primary them. So they think I'm mean because I tell their constituents, primary them if they don't do their job. But at the end of the day, and yes, we're always, respectful, but they are our employees, and we should never feel like, oh my gosh, I can't speak my mind at all, or I have to walk on eggshells because they're a rep or they're a senator. They're a rep or a senator because you put them there with your vote, and they do work for you. And if they're not working for you, it's okay to say, hey, I'm very disappointed. I heard you're not going to vote for this bill. It's okay to say things like that to them, or say, hey, we may have to primary you if you can't get this done. There is a time and a place to double down a little bit. If you've been nice for, say, 10 years, might be time to put a little salt in there too. But keep it keep it, nice, keep it respectful. So, I always like to say, give them some sugar, but it's okay to have a little salt in there too, if need be.
That's great advice. And I tell people, mind their P's. You can be critical of policy, but, don't go after the person. Just
Right.
stick with the policy, stick with the bills, and you can't go wrong. So please, everyone in Ohio, contact your rep, your senators, and the House Health Committee members to support the Jeff, Dave, and Angie patient Right to Try Act. And then it's the House Bill 12. So please have them support it. And I want to thank you both for coming on today and sharing your words of advice and wisdom and insight into this bill. We're definitely going to stay on top of this. And, if we get this over to the Senate, and we may have you back on to discuss, it's always interesting to see what obstacles, what arguments come up and how you combat them. It's educational for everyone. So thank you again for your time during this busy time.
Thank you so much, Dawn. We appreciate it.
Take care, and we'll talk to y'all soon. All right, guys. So please share this show with others. Visit the CHD TV website, and under shows, pick Advocacy Lifeline. And please copy the link to this week's show and share it, especially to people in Ohio. And drop a donation to CHD or to the National Vaccine Information Center, OAMF. We're trying to do the good work here, and we need your dollars to support doing this work. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on today and listening and sharing the information and taking it all on and taking action. We appreciate you. We'll be back 2 weeks from today on Wednesday at 10:30 Eastern Time, 7:30 a.m. Pacific Time. God bless y'all. God bless America. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
This is a story about Corbin. His mother writes that when he was 1, he had all the CDC scheduled shots. 43 days later, Corbin got a flu shot at 9:30 in the morning, and he was dead between 9 and 11 p.m. that evening. The mother talks about when she was laying him on the table to get him vaccinated, she felt something inside her screaming, no, don't do it. But she says the moment had passed. She had to go and work, and so she said that she lay over to kiss him goodnight, and she said she remembers looking at her son and thinking, he looks really sad, but she didn't know that would be the last time she would ever kiss her son. So again, he received his 12-month shot, and 43 days prior to this flu shot that he got that ultimately killed him, he was 13.5 months when he died. He would have been 11 years old today. It's tragic because it's the same sort of story as so many of us, and our children, are either injured, brain injured, or they're dead. So we're going to put Corbin on the bus. We're not going to sign Corbin's name because you will meet Corbin's mom when we go up to Utah, which is where they live, and she will write Corbin's name on the bus. And I have to tell you, when I speak to these mothers, you never get over the heartbreak of losing your child and the trauma of these mothers years and years on. It's never ending. So we will honor Corbin, who was lied to, his parents were lied to. One shot that morning killed Corbin. Let's go and put him on the bus. I'm going to put him up here. Okay, I'll fix that, guys. But there's air conditioning blowing, that's why it's all a bit wibbly wobbly. But there is Corbin. Look at that beautiful boy. Flu vaccine.
Autism destroys families, and more importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
pledged to find out what is driving the country's rise in autism.
Compiling medical records from a number of databases. He'll direct resources to study environmental factors, exposures, and external factors.
Scientific progress on this has been slow because scientists are frankly scared to ask the question.
Genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin, and we're going to look at all the potential culprits.
With no a priori thumb on the scale, you can't look at that.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to the Secretary for finally saying from an important public platform that this is an epidemic and we need to find the causes and we need to stop it.
Other issues CHD has been pushing for years are finally gaining mainstream traction.
Today we're announcing we are removing industry members, pharma members from FDA advisory committees.
We're seeing reports that you're considering removing the COVID vaccine as a mandatory shot for children.
The recommendation for children was always dubious. The vaccine itself does have profound risk of myocarditis, pericarditis, even strokes.
Very, 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 very few people are still taking these things. In that sense, the mRNA vaccines for COVID in the marketplace are effectively dead.
We are working together to change the federal fluoride recommendations, and we're looking at the science now. There's a direct inverse correlation between fluoride exposure and low IQ in children.
Health officials announced plans to phase out 8 artificial dyes from our food supply.
The FDA is effectively removing all petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply.
We don't have a surveillance system that actually works, and that is a crime. And we will do that right away. And I understand the perverse incentives that need to be changed right away.
When there's a political will to answer a question like this, it will happen.
We're going to change things for real this time.